Hey, Screenwriters. Today I want to talk to you about a book that's really transformed the way that I approach my screenwriting. It's actually become so important to my own creative process that it is now permanently on my desk when I'm writing. Like it never leaves me. It's either in my backpack or on my desk. And it's a book that tells you that you're actually spending your time as a writer the wrong way. Instead of spending all your time writing, you should actually be focusing on developing your idea. So what's this book and why is it so important to me? Let's get into it. As screenwriters, I think we've been taught that the most important thing you can do as a writer is to write every day. The book that I'm about to tell you about tells you should be spending your time in a different way. As writers, specifically as screenwriters, we should be focusing most of our time developing the idea of our screenplay, the actual core idea that drives a story forward. It's the idea that's going to get people interested in reading your screenplay. A lot of time it's the idea that actually gets your screenplay optioned or purchased, regardless of how good your script even is. So the book that's completely transformed the way I look at screenwriting and the way I approach my own writing is a book by Erik Bork called The Idea. So the core concept of the idea is a simple truth that you as a screenwriter should be spending most of your time developing the core idea of your screenplay. And the wonderful thing about this book is that it actually gives you some guidelines in terms of how to develop a really great idea. In particular, how to develop an idea that Hollywood would be interested in purchasing, acquiring, that would get the attention of directors, producers, agents, and managers. He mentions something that has always sort of perplexed me about Hollywood, but when he explains it, suddenly it all makes sense. If you've ever realized there are movies that just don't die, there are movies that get stuck in development hell for years and years and years, and they're constantly working on the script and they're constantly rewriting the script, they're getting new screenwriters to work on it, in some cases 10, 20 writers working on the same script. And I've always wondered why don't they just let the screenplay die and go find something else to write on? And then it suddenly hit me, because the core idea of that screenplay was so compelling that the studio never wanted to let it die. And that's Erik's point in his book, that if you have a strong idea and a weak screenplay will always overcome a bad idea and a good screenplay. So a good screenplay that's well written, that's well executed, but has sort of a lousy idea at the heart of it, will never beat a bad screenplay with a great idea. And The Idea is such a wonderful book because it really helps you focus your attention and creativity in terms of developing a core concept that is going to make your script more marketable, and it's actually going to make your life 1,000 times easier as a screenwriter when you're writing that screenplay, because you've already figured out the idea initially before having to work on it over 130 pages of a script. And if you don't own it, you absolutely should, because it's a spectacular book. And today I want to talk to you about The Idea, how it's helped me in my writing, and to give you a little bit more insight in terms of what the thesis of this book is and how it can help you develop your next screenplay. So the central thesis of The Idea is broken out into an acronym called PROBLEM, PROBLEM. And each letter of that word stands for a fundamental facet of what makes for a great idea. So in this video, I'm going to explain what each one of those letters stands for, how it helps create a more compelling idea for a screenplay, and ultimately try and convince you to get this book. Like I said, it is one of the finest books on screenwriting that I've ever read. So the P in problem stands for punishing. Whatever scenario you have your main character in, it should be punishing, it should be grueling, and it should take 3 acts and 130 pages for your main character to overcome the central punishing issue of that screenplay. The scenario that you present your main character with should not be easily overcome. Your character has to struggle with scene after scene and act after act. And this core concept of something being punishing has really impacted my writing in a sense that it's helped me define what my second act is going to be. When you read the book, you quickly understand that your second act is about your main character being faced with obstacle after obstacle after obstacle to reach their goal. And the word punishing has really inspired me to make sure that the obstacles that my main characters have to face are grueling. They're not simple. They're not just internal struggles or external struggles. There's something that require ultimately a complete transformation of that main character. Make sure you get your main character in a scenario where every single scene is punishing them before they finally overcome their challenges. R, relatable. Your main character has to be relatable. The struggle that they're involved in has to be relatable. It has to, at some human level, the audience needs to be able to connect with this main character. Whether it is their own personal foibles, whether it's the scenario they're thrown in, whether it is the struggles that they're trying to overcome internally or externally, regardless of what it is, you have to make sure that your main character and your main character's struggles are relatable. That adds a really unique dimension, not just to your central idea, but to your screenplay, because it helps ground everything. I find when I'm writing now, I try to make sure that as an audience member, I'm going to be able to look at this character and go, I see a little bit of myself in this main character. I see a little bit of my own personal struggles in terms of what they're trying to achieve on the screen. The idea of relatability is really important because it helps build empathy. And the one thing you want your audience to do is to empathize with your main character. Main characters and conflicts in movies that aren't empathetic, that we can't relate to, we suddenly have no desire to become involved in this story. And as much as possible, you want your audience, you want your reader, you want your viewer to be engaged and involved in your narrative. So, R is for relatable. Make sure that whatever problem you place your main character into, and the main character itself is as relatable as possible. O is for original. And this should come to no surprise to anybody. Whatever your central idea is, whatever your script about, should have an original twist to it. It shouldn't simply be a reductive version of some other movie you've seen. You have to have your own unique voice, your own unique spin to a scenario. This doesn't mean that you can't retell a story that's already been told before. It just means that when you attempt to retell it, there has to be an original take on it. So O for originality has really impacted my writing because it's forced me to always look at my big picture idea to see, is there something unique that I'm adding to it? Is there something fundamentally different about the way I'm telling this story? Whether it's a take on the genre, whether it's a take on the character, whether it's a take on the scenario that is distinctly mine, that an agent, that a manager, that a director or a producer who looks at it will go, we haven't seen this spin on this story before. So O is for original. Make sure that whatever screenplay you write is original to you, to your voice, and to the scenario that you're writing for. B is for believable. Whatever scenario you get your main character into, whatever your big story is, even if there's a leap of faith that's required, even if there's a leap of logic, even if you have to suspend your disbelief, at some point it has to be believable. I have to believe that these scenarios can exist. I have to believe that these characters can exist. I have to believe that this conflict can exist. And grounding your story in believability, making sure that every scene is as real as possible, regardless of what the genre is, whether it's a horror genre or a sci-fi genre, whether your story takes place 1,000,000 miles in space or 1,000 miles underneath the ground, that the story that you're putting forward, that the narrative that you're putting forward is as believable as possible. Believability grounds your story. It keeps the audience engaged because they begin to believe that what they're watching or the reader, what they're reading, is real. It helps them create a connection with the main character. It helps them feel whatever the main character is feeling. It really deepens empathy. So maintaining believability in your narrative is critically important to the success of your screenplay and ultimately the success of your idea. So when you're writing, keep things as believable as possible, regardless of what the genre is. That doesn't mean that you can't invent new technologies in your movie or fantastical ideas. It just means that the internal logic of your movie has to make sense. It has to be believable. When you create your world and you create the rules of your world, that world has to make sense. It has to be compelling and believable to the audience. So again, B for believable. Make sure you include that in all your screenplays. It will really help elevate your narrative. L is for life-altering. This is a really, I think, sort of for me anyway, it was a profound observation that Erik has in terms of what makes for a compelling idea and ultimately what makes for a compelling story, is that when your characters finish their journey, when they go through this punishing, grueling first act, second act, third act, that at the end of the story, it has been a life-altering experience for them, that they have fundamentally changed as a character, and we as an audience have seen them fundamentally change. The life-altering aspect of a story is critical because it is in that transformation that your hero becomes a hero. The classic definition of a hero is the character that changes throughout the story. The life-altering nature of a narrative means that when we reach that third act, the audience doesn't simply feel they've been part of an amusement ride of some kind, that we have been part of something really profound, that we have seen this character evolve and change and grow, struggle, and then finally overcome whatever it is that they were struggling against. So when you're writing a screenplay, L for life altering, make sure that whatever scenario you're putting your main character in is going to fundamentally change who they are as a person when you reach that third act. E for entertaining. This should go without saying, but I think a lot of times we as screenwriters sometimes forget this, that if you hit the lottery and your screenplay is made into a movie and people are going to sit down and watch it for an hour and a half, 2 hours, they want to be entertained. Keeping in mind the entertainment factor of your screenplay is critical, and the entertainment factor of your idea is also critical. When you pitch your logline, when you pitch your idea to somebody, they have to look at it and go, wow, this is something I can see myself spending 2 hours watching. This is something that's going to be entertaining. I'm going to be engaged throughout this story. Maintaining the entertainment factor of an idea and of a screenplay is critically important to the success of that screenplay. Because even if your screenplay is brilliant, if it's dull, if the audience sort of gets lost, if the audience gets bored, it fails as an idea and it fails as a screenplay. So always keep in mind, E for entertaining. Make sure that your idea, make sure that your screenplay is entertaining. People are going to enjoy watching this. People are going to walk away going, that was worth 2 hours of my time. E for entertaining. M for meaningful. Ultimately, the entire journey of your main character, the entire journey of your story from Act 1 to Act 3 has to be meaningful. We as an audience also have to be transformed throughout this journey. We have to walk away feeling that our lives have somehow been enriched, that our time has been spent valuably, that we have somehow been transformed throughout this experience, that we've learned something new about the human condition, or we've learned something new about the world, or our place in it. Making sure that a story is meaningful, to me, is also important because of the longevity of that script, the longevity of that idea. The most successful movies, I think, in history, there was something meaningful about it to you. There was something that it gave you a better insight about the world, about good versus evil, about the struggles of a hero that lasted with you for many years afterwards. Developing the meaningfulness of your screenplay, the meaningfulness of your idea should be a priority to you when you're writing. The more meaningful your idea is, the more likely your screenplay will succeed, and the more meaningful your screenplay is, I think the more long-lasting the impact your movie will have in the long term. So again, M for meaningful. Integrate it into your story development, integrate it to your idea development. Make sure that whatever you're writing has a meaningful impact on people. So, when I tell you that this book has transformed the way I write, I'm not joking. I spend more time now obsessing about the core idea of a screenplay than I do actually writing the screenplay itself. I spend more time making sure that I have a fully fledged idea, I have a fully thought out concept before I even start typing page 1. Because I know that if the idea is solid, the idea will capture the attention of an agent, a manager, a producer, a director, even if the central screenplay isn't all that great or even is weak. This book has fundamentally transformed the way that I do my writing. It sits on my desk all the time. It's in my knapsack all the time. I bring it everywhere I go. Because anytime I'm feeling stuck, anytime I feel that I can't make progress with something, I just take this out and I remind myself the fundamentals of what makes a great idea. Erik Bork has written what I think is one of the most important screenwriting books in history. And I'm not saying this to be hyperbolic, I'm being dead serious. This is a phenomenally powerful book. It is super simple to read. I've only covered the basics of it in this video. He goes into much greater detail on the full acronym of problem, chapter by chapter, breaking out what makes each individual facet of that word so powerful to your next idea. I can't recommend it enough. Erik Bork, The Idea. I don't think you'll regret getting this. I think this will transform the way you do your writing. I think it will make your screenwriting so much easier. You can get it on Amazon. There's going to be links below. Erik Bork is not just an author. He's an Emmy and Golden Globe Award winning screenwriter and producer for Band of Brothers, so he knows his stuff, and he knows what makes a great idea. If you've ever struggled as a screenwriter to develop a really solid idea, if you've ever struggled in terms of where your next idea should come from, this book will help you determine not only if your idea meets the standards of what a Hollywood producer would be looking for, it will also help you deconstruct whatever idea you're currently working on to ensure that every element of it is as solid as possible, so that when you're writing that screenplay will be the best version of that screenplay possible. If you've read the idea, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. For me, like I said, this book has absolutely transformed the way I write. It's completely transformed the way I approach screenwriting, and I would love to hear your ideas in terms of what you think of the idea. So drop a comment in the box below. Let me know what your thoughts are. So that's my video for this week. If you have any comments, you have any questions, drop them in the box below. Happy writing.